December 8th, 2020. Turns out the president-elect and I have this in common. We'll both be moving soon and need to sort out our cabinets. For me, it's a pretty simple matter of making sure the things I use most are within reach, and that my feline roommate approves of the layout of her cabinet. For Joe Biden, which is what everyone from Kamala Harris to all those wacky CNN pundits insist on calling him, it's a bit more challenging. Biden's first announcement was for Secretary of State, and boy did he knock it out of the park. Antony Blinken is no one's idea of Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, either of the John Adamses, Daniel Webster, or George Marshall. Hell, he's not even the next Martin Van Buren. But he is a long-standing FOJ, friend of Joe Biden. So there's that. And at least he's not Mike Pompeo, so it's unlikely that Blinken will winken to partisanship while abroad. Also, he's not abroad. I'm sure he'll be fine in the way that John Kerry was fine. Speaking of whom, Biden named Kerry as his climate czar, which doesn't require Senate confirmation because, that's not a real thing. This appointment will give the former senator / presidential candidate / Secretary of State / blowhard the opportunity to jet off on private planes to Paris, Berlin, and Beijing, where he can spew bullshit with other global leaders in an effort to make themselves feel good about accomplishing absolutely nothing. Perfect. Biden also announced that Janet Yellen will be his Treasury Secretary. I guess she knows a lot of economics and all, so fine. I don't hear a lot of people yelling about Yellen, which means she'll likely sail through her confirmation and be well on the way to treasure come January 20th. Assuming, that is, that enough GOP senators recognize the results of an election that everyone who matters, plus Bill Barr, believe was fair and free. And I know it's early, but I do have some questions, namely about Biden's choices for defense and health and human services. Fairly recently retired General Lloyd Austin was designated for the former position. Austin seems qualified and is apparently well respected around D.C., but his confirmation will require a waiver of the 7-year waiting period, which is required by law before he can head on over to the Pentagon. Sure, James, don't you dare call me Mad Dog Mattis needed a similar waiver in 2017, which was granted because no one trusted Donald Trump to play with his new army men without adult supervision. But surely there are plenty of civilians with limited ties to the military-industrial complex who could do the job without violating a law passed by Congress. Otherwise, what's the point? Just repeal the damn thing and get on with it. Well, repealing the law would require another act of Congress, so I'm sure Mitch and Nancy will get right on that. As for Health and Human Services, looks like California Attorney General Xavier Becerra is the guy. I actually kind of like Becerra, on account of he spent the last 4 years suing the shit out of the Trump administration over everything from immigration to Obamacare to just being a bunch of goose-stepping brown sharp fascists. So I'd love it if the AG became the AG. But HHS? WTF? Unless Becerra would likely have a difficult go of it as Attorney General in a Republican Senate, what with him spending the last 4 years suing the shit out of the Trump administration and all. But voting against the HHS nominee in the midst of a pandemic, well, that'd be a pretty tall order even for Tool and the gang. Maybe Becerra's nomination is actually a stroke of genius from a guy who seems a lot closer to having a stroke than exhibiting any signs of genius. Look, Biden promised a cabinet that looks like America, and that's fine. But he seems to be ticking off the boxes. A woman here, a black dude there, and don't forget the Latino, just to avoid ticking off the Democrats. He didn't rule out including a Republican in his brain trust, but he didn't exactly rule it in either. Just like a year ago, when he said he'd consider a GOP running mate, but couldn't for the life of him think of one just then. I came up with 3 without breaking a sweat, any one of whom would have gotten me to jump on the Biden bandwagon. And that's the problem with a paint-by-numbers politician. You end up with a paint-by-numbers administration. Sure, as long as you don't color outside the lines, you'll end up with a perfectly serviceable government. But you can't create a masterpiece without hurting someone's feelings, which pretty much sums up what I expect in the next 4 years. It'll probably be fine in the way that treading water is fine. But no one will remember Michael Phelps as the greatest water treader of all time. Just saying.